right, everyone. Episode 15 of Debrief. Excited to be here. Excited to explore another week's theme of dyslexia. Hi, Kerry. How are you?
Good. Okay, so the invite came to my phone and I was on my computer. So anyways,
okay.
I figured it out. So now I'm on my phone. Hopefully you can see me okay.
I can see you. Yeah, the thing about Instagram Live is you can't do them on your computer. So I don't even know. I guess they promote you to like be live, out and do stuff. So so sorry about any confusion.
Oh, no. That is fine. Learning all the technology. I'm there. I'm braving it.
I love it. So I do want to say that because I started a new account, there's last week had very few people joining in live, but I know people view these later. So I know on my old account, more people popped in. So we'll just still chat as if there's an audience here, but I know people will be watching this later. You can use this on your platform. So
great.
So excited about this. So as I said to you, I like to keep these 30 minutes. And a lot of it is, I've done these interviews for, I guess been about 2 years. And the first year I did them, I would use the whole hour that Instagram would let me talk. And a lot of it was because people were sharing their stories for the first time. And so I always wanted to have that space to allow that, but then I also know people tune out in 15 or 20 minutes. So that's why I'm just
absolutely. You can end up having a lot of filler time, right? You could get to that 45-minute mark and wonder, I'm not really sure what to do with the rest of it.
Yeah, so I've learned over time, and myself, I have ADHD. I'm I don't think I can, unless it's a gripping show. I'm I don't think I would sit there and listen for that long. So I just the point of these, if you've seen any of them before, it's really a conversation. And we've talked about your story. So I really what I would like is for you to share your story and then talk about what you're doing and how you support families with your coaching as well. So how does that sound?
Okay. That sounds great. So I'll give you a quick rundown. I was a kid that had a learning disability. It was not diagnosed as dyslexia for the longest time. Basically, my parents would request to get me tested at the schools, not understanding that the full battery of tests was not being done. Right. So they were like, she has something, but she's too smart to have, a massive learning disability. She'll grow out of it. She'll, she's smart enough. And so basically I was just white knuckling school pretty much.
Right.
Yeah. And then we moved to Egypt and I started middle school in Egypt and love Egypt. But I can tell you, they did not know what to do with me in Egypt. So, now I'm all of a sudden in middle school and I could read, but I had zero comprehension. So for a book report, I could read the whole book and maybe know 2 characters' names and a little bit of the plot. So in middle school, it became a lot more of a problem, but I was living in Egypt. So there really weren't the testing. The testing didn't exist there at the time. And, each teacher just kind of tried to work with me as they could to kind of get me through. Then I hit high school, and that's when all of the massive tutoring started, right? Get a tutoring for history, get a tutor for science, get a tutor for all of these different things. And I came from a family of just highly gifted people. So I felt like I didn't belong. I would sit at the dinner table and here's my brother who is profoundly gifted. He is fluent in, I want to say 12 languages. It's off the charts.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's a linguist now. I tell people, as a joke, not as a joke, but in 9th grade, he asked for his own private Arabic tutor so that he could move faster through the language. So this is what I was dealing with. Then my dad was an international researcher who would study tropical diseases and come up with vaccines. And then my mom, she was a federal attorney. And when we moved back to the States, she became a federal judge. So then there's me at the dinner table. That bar is so high, right? And then there I am. And I remember my parents saying, but you're so good at art. And I was good at art. That's great. But, I'm looking around. I just knew I was different, right? And so get into college, kind of white knuckle it, get tutors, everything. And then I got my master's degree in art education and loved it. And I blossomed because I was really like in this field that I loved. And I lived abroad and I was an art teacher abroad and loved it. And then I came back to the States and I ended up getting my master's in therapy and clinical social work. So I'm a therapist now. And once I had my son, I was a therapist when I had my son, and he was at the end of preschool. He was about 4 or 5, and the teacher said, you need to get him tested. There's something going on.
Right.
And she said, this kid knows every single scientific name of dinosaurs, but he cannot recognize a single letter. So,
right.
Right? Yeah. So I got him tested, and I'm looking at the results. And I had been tested when we moved back to the States, right before college. And nobody ever said this plus this plus this equals dyslexia.
Right.
So I never had a name for it, right?
Okay.
And because I never really had accommodations in high school, I never accessed them in college.
Wow.
So it was just, when I say white knuckling it, it was really like, I'm hoping I'm going to get a C here in history class.
Wow.
So when I read my son's report, it was mind-blowing because the psychologist connected all the dots and said, Kerry, this is dyslexia. I pulled out my old papers. And then when I went back and I spoke to the doctor again, I said, okay, wait, do I have dyslexia? And I literally remember driving home. My son wasn't there for that actual
conversation,
right? The kind of like, I call it the post-mortem after the testing's done. So he wasn't there for that. But I remember I'm driving home and I'm on the highway, and it was this dual emotions. I was so sad that my son had dyslexia because I knew my struggle. But then at the same time, there's a little bit of like an elation that I knew what I had. I finally had that label. And so many people are scared of that label. But for me, I felt liberated. So I'm holding onto the steering wheel and I'm driving and I'm like, I'm Kerry. I have dyslexia. Anyone in the car would have thought I was absolutely insane. And so that's when my dyslexia advocacy started. And I used my platform of marathon swimming.
Yes.
And
I remember you were telling me about the swimming. Yes.
Yeah. So one of my strengths in high school is that I was a really good swimmer. So that helped with my confidence, moving through high school. And so I said, okay, well, I'm a marathon swimmer. I have all these like stupid open water goals that are really long. I might as well use it as a platform for something. So I used it as a platform to raise awareness of the strengths and the struggles of dyslexia. And then we raised, I want to say it was like $50,000 for the nonprofit Noticeability. So
yes,
it's such a great nonprofit. So as people started to recognize like, oh, there's a swimmer with dyslexia, conversations began. And then my son went to a dyslexia school. So parents started to come to me with more questions outside of dyslexia is about reading. They knew I was a therapist. And so all of a sudden these questions started coming about the emotional impact that dyslexia has on people.
Right.
And that discussion, it's just now beginning in the dyslexia world. So I've been working, with kids and with parents and then adults with dyslexia, literally on the emotional, the psychosocial impact of dyslexia. So I am not a reading tutor. Good on you for doing that, Lauren. I watched my son go through it. That is a difficult job. It's a lot. It's a difficult job. Mm-hmm. So I literally just focus on the psychosocial, emotional impact of dyslexia. So the theme that I've noticed in my practice is that parents are so, and they have to be, so focused on advocating for their child to get the reading therapy that they need, advocating that they get the accommodations or modifications, that this side, the emotional wellness is kind of pushed to the side.
Right.
And parents have, so they don't know, oh, is my child upset just because they're kids? They don't make that connection always that my child is struggling because of the dyslexia. And there's this myth out there that once my child will learn to read, all the anxiety goes away.
Yeah,
They're going to
yeah.
learn to read, and their self-esteem is going to be fantastic. And that's not the case. All of those, I call them pain points. You know, imagine you're in an elementary classroom for what, 6 years, 5 years, and every day you have like this button, like an elevator button, and this pain button is hit every single day. You feel stupid. You can't read.
Right.
You're reading a Bob book and Joe Schmo is reading a chapter book. Like every day it's being hit, 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 hit. And even if you're not being told those messages, you're internalizing them. You're looking around. You know, dyslexics, we're smart. We're taking it all in. And so these kids have these pain points that aren't addressed, and the parents are missing them. Mm-hmm. And then they go into middle school, where puberty hits, and everything's a comparison game. And the self-esteem just starts to plummet even more.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, other kids might be going into middle school with their self-esteem, let's say at like an 8 or a 7. Our dyslexic kids are going into middle school at like a 2.
Yeah, I was just about to say like a 3 or a 2 or a 4. Yeah.
So their drop, right? They don't have that far to fall before it's like a crisis emotionally.
Right.
And so my goal working with parents and then working with, I work a lot with the teenagers too and adults that have dyslexia, is to, one, with the parents, catch those pain points early, help build that self-esteem. And we work through ways to do it with kids that are outside of academics. One of the examples is finding an island of expertise, that one thing that they're better at than anyone else in the room. And so for my son, that was open water swimming, just because that's what I did. So he always had that in his back pocket, right? Like, I'm an open water swimmer. I can tell people at age 10, I swam Alcatraz, right? So that bolsters him. Yeah, isn't that, I have an awesome.
I didn't even know what open water swimming was, but when you gave me that reference point, I'm like, not a lot of adults can do that.
So he was 10 and he swam Alcatraz. We hired a pilot because, you know, the boats, they have to stop the traffic. And so he did that. He did that for Swim for Dyslexia to raise awareness. So he had that as his island of expertise. And so that bolstered him. But I understood that concept because that, for me, it was swimming. That's what got me through. And I know you and I had discussions, and you had said what got you through your ADHD was track. Yeah. That was kind of like your one thing, right? And so I help parents kind of discover what is their child's island of expertise, and then using positive psychology, because the kids have had enough of the negativity, right? They hear the negative, where their deficiencies are every day. So I work with parents on a strength-based approach. So that's a lot. That's much more than my childhood. I think I just talked your ear off.
No, but you know what though? Like, I love this. I love hearing it because I know we had sent so many voice threads to get to know each other. And I want to touch on a few things that you had talked about earlier. So I know we talked about Egypt. I loved hearing your story in Egypt, and that's crazy about your brother. My gosh, like 12 languages. And so of course you're sitting there at the dinner table, like you said, like, okay. But what I want to pinpoint is the fact that, like, you know, I always do a shout out to Sarah, who is in Egypt. And so she is doing so much great work out there because she shared her story a year and a half ago about how Egypt is so behind and they don't even acknowledge dyslexia. And I know Sarah's younger than me, and I don't know, you know, what your age is, Kerry, but I'm sure Egypt is still really behind. So I can't
I know for a fact it's really behind because my husband's job, he got this great opportunity to go back to the Middle East. And I was so excited because that's my home. I was like, oh my God, we're going to go back to Middle East. And we went to Saudi Arabia and we lasted 4 months. And it was 4 months because my son, who is GT, he's got a great IQ, wicked smart. He was in grade 3 at the time. None of the schools would accept a child with dyslexia. Wrap your head around that. So the American School of Riyadh, I'll probably get a ton of hate mail. The American School of Riyadh, we're taking a tour. It's fantastic. And then I said, oh, so what are your services for dyslexia? And they said, oh, no, I'm sorry, you can't apply. We weren't even allowed to apply to the schools. And then at the time, the only school that had a dyslexia program, it was basically they would give my son a scribe to read and write for him. So there was no intervention. So then we went from Saudi to Bahrain. Well, maybe in Bahrain we can find him a school. No schools. And then I desperately called Egypt, my old school, and I said, do you have any dyslexia services? And my friend actually happened to be working in the admissions. And she's like, we have one classroom for dyslexia in elementary school. Let me see. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so my husband's going to live in Saudi Arabia. We're going to live in Egypt. I mean, I'm dyslexic. We think out of the box, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? That had a 2-year wait list, that one class.
Well, because it's one class. I mean, and was this in Cairo?
Right? It was in Cairo. Yeah, it was in Cairo.
That's another thing too that Sarah talked about. Everything is just in Cairo and it's not even like top notch. So it's like, I just think about you, little Kerry, you know, trying to do what you need to do. But this also is a testament to how smart you naturally are. Like you didn't have your accommodations to really know how to maximize. I can be up here with everyone else. I just need it done this way, or I need these accommodations. And like, I always want to capitalize on that as an educator, because there are, as you talked about the parents, there's so many parents that will either, you know, think the intervention's enough and not think about the social emotional, or they're parents that are like, I know my kid is smart, but they don't know how to support them. And it's like, once they get those supports, then you really see them blossom. So, I mean, I really feel like, well, first of all, I know this as a fact, as an educator working with dyslexic kids, especially at the elementary level, because I was working at a private dyslexic school. Those kids came in bruised, battered, everything. They were in 4th grade. And I was like, these kids seem like they've like been through the ringer because of public school. But I mean, it was the kind of thing where they were in this space, finally got what they needed, the social emotional, you know, the speech services, the Orton Gillingham approach, and they were able to flourish. And so it's just like, you know, I don't know. I feel so passionate about like hearing all of these stories. And then when you commented on my ADHD, like, I thought I was stupid for the longest time myself, because I was looking at everyone else like, well, they're studying so much and they're getting A's, and I studied just as long and I'm failing, you know. And I realized I was just like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but hey, I'm really good on track, and I got 2 track scholarships. I paid for school, and you know, it's just I just resonate with so much of what you said on so many levels, and I just love how you're using. So when you coach, it's really because you're a licensed therapist, like you're actually doing the therapy.
I'm a licensed therapist, and then I took a course. It's called a clinic coach. So I'm a clinician coach, right?
I love that.
Yeah, so it's called a clinic coach certification, and you know, I'm working more on. I'm not working with the kids that have crumbled and burned. They need to have a therapist for that. I'm working on the prevention, right? So I'm getting the kids, right as the parents are seeing the struggles, send me your kid. Right as you see the parent, right as you're getting that diagnosis, come to me, and I'm going to kind of give you the map of all of the landmines that can go off. And so I work on bolstering the mental wellness so that they don't have to fall, right? But the parents don't know that they need that, right? So it's kind of hard because you don't know what you don't know when your child's first diagnosed. And that learning curve is so huge that they're just really focused on the academic piece. But my goal, like, I'm very passionate just about educating about the emotional impacts of dyslexia.
So it's interesting because I was actually talking to my husband about this, and I think in this dyslexia space, first of all, I'll state this, you know, it is a community approach, right? And so I was talking to my husband about my older daughter who went through an eating disorder. And so, you know, the first thing, if that's not your area of expertise, the first thing you think is, well, we want to make sure, you know, she's getting enough food. You make sure she's like, you know, okay. But really, the pediatrician was like, you need a dietitian, you need a therapist, you need a psychiatrist, you need all of these.
A whole team.
Yeah, you need all hands on deck. And so when I hear you talk about this, because you know, one of my main focuses, obviously I'm more Gillingham trained and, you know, I can tutor and all that, but my main focus right now, and I think it's because I'm a mom, I want to coach moms through the knowledge of the the special ed process and like
Yes.
the mom guilt and all that. And it's like, I come from a different angle. You come from a lived experience angle, but then you have the clinical angle. And you're right. I think there's so much that parents are like, my kid can't read, let's get them to read. But it's like, there's so many other things there that you don't know what you don't know. And that's essentially where my husband and I were with my daughter. We didn't know what we didn't know. We just knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I, I would compare those two. I used to work in an eating disorder clinic, actually. So it's really, I totally get it. Like, it's an all hands on deck approach. And that's how it should be with dyslexia, but it's not, right? So basically, I was talking to one of my friends whose daughter just got diagnosed, and she said, well, my daughter got diagnosed. We had to fight for a year and a half. Now she's getting the services. Nobody ever educated the parents as to what dyslexia is. Right? And nobody really even educated the daughter on what dyslexia is. So right?
Here's your diagnosis, and that's
and you're gonna get like removed from the classroom a whole lot. Right. Or guess what? There's all these kids whose parents won't tell them the diagnosis.
That's actually something that I sat at the IEP table in middle school. And so when I was co-teaching 8th grade, I would actually tell the parents, your child in the state of Maryland, like once they're 14, they can legally come to their meetings. And I strongly advise that you let them, because they have to advocate for themselves. And some parents were like, oh, I didn't know. How can we prepare them? And some are like, I just don't know. Like, I want to be able to make sure that I'm advocating. And it's like, that is not good news. Like, I understand, especially when your kid's in 2nd or 3rd grade, you want to be mama bear, you want to do it. But like, you've got to talk to them about what's going on with them, so they don't think there's anything wrong with themselves as they get older. So,
Exactly. And I mean, honestly, I'll tell you, I fell in that trap for about 2 weeks. I was like, I don't want to tell him he has dyslexia.
Just 2 weeks though.
And at the end of 2 weeks, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, we got to open that can of worms, right? But for example, my son, to give parents hope, right? My son, he's 15 now. He's at a college prep school. Like, he's on the honor roll. He has all A's. Like, it happens, right? The kids can get there. But we went to, his IEP meeting for next year, and they know I'm a therapist and a coach. And so they were talking to me, and they said, sometimes we have to bring our kids in here and show them their testing because they're in high school and the parents have still not told them. Can you imagine reaching high school and still not knowing you're dyslexic, or you have slow working, memory or something like that? Poor working memory or slow processing. So they're finding themselves having to just, educate the children. Like, okay, you're having trouble because of the working memory, but they don't even know what working memory means in high school. Imagine if they had that knowledge in 3rd grade. They wouldn't think that they're stupid. They would just say, it just takes me a little bit longer to get the concept.
No, and I totally agree with you. And I'm loving this conversation, because every week I learn something new on these conversations. Like, I know you shared your story, but I feel like the bulk of this right now is like, people need to hear this. People need to understand, like, I'm going to continue talking about this from the educator perspective, and you're going to keep talking about this for a plethora of reasons. And there are just so many folks out there who just don't want to admit, and I get it. I know there's denial with it, and maybe that's deep rooted in family. Maybe grandma was dyslexic and didn't know it, or maybe dad kind of danced around things. But it's like, we as a society have to continue to talk about this, have to continue to advocate, and have to, like, especially not keep this away from our kids, because that's really the thing that, just hearing your feedback on this, I'm not surprised you agree with me, but I don't understand that. I understand it from the sense of shame, but I also am thinking, like, but you have to tell your child, this is why you have an IEP. Because they know they have one. They know.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And I think some of it is shame-based, right? There's definitely those parents out there that feel like, oh my God, people are going to think my child's stupid. Right. And so I give those parents, like, here's a script. Right. This is what you're going to tell people when they ask what is dyslexia, because they don't know what to say. Or here's a script. This is what you're going to tell grandma and grandpa when they say your kid just needs to read more. Right? So that's kind of how I work with them. But my biggest goal is, let's normalize dyslexia. Because right now, I read this one quote, because I read it, I can't quite remember it exactly.
Okay.
It's something to the effect of, let's act like dyslexia is your house on fire and it's a crisis, because it absolutely is.
It is. Yeah.
It is. And if we don't get these kids the services and then also the mental wellness component addressed early, what you end up happening is, I mean, I see adult dyslexics, right, that have been in bad relationships, that have never really like soared, you know, in their career, that have been really stunted because of the self-esteem issues that they have. I mean, can you imagine, like, if you were to tell a parent, your child in grade 3, we have to work on the emotional impact because we don't want them to have such poor self-esteem that they're in an abusive relationship as an adult. That's the connections that wake parents up.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I know that we could probably do a part 2 on the mental health part. And
I'd love it.
I would actually really enjoy that, because I don't think parents realize the impact of, like, you know, the good that you and I do together, collectively and separately. They don't see that, like what you just said, you know. I think that's absolutely true. And I know as moms, you know, we're busy, we're in the weeds every day. So we're just thinking like, oh, well, I got a meal plan, I got to get to soccer practice, I got to do this. But you still, once you're a parent, you're always a parent. So you want to make sure you're thinking 10, 15 years down the line. I mean, like I said, my older daughter, she's in college, and my husband and I, over holiday break, we were talking about, she's a freshman, and we're like, the goal is for you not to move back home. The goal is for you to be independent and have a job and have a career. And it's like, those are things that I know when we're, like I said, in the weeds, getting the diagnosis, wondering how we're going to pay for services, wondering how we're going to pay for therapy, insurance, all that stuff. We still have to think big picture. So Kerry, I would love if we could actually talk off the live and maybe come up with a part 2 or some, I would love it, or something. I just think this is just so needed to talk about.
I love it. I think that would be great. I don't know what time we're at right now, but I did want to give parents one skill that they can start with their kids today.
Yeah, that would be a great way to close out. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when and let me just put this out there. If you go to Kerry, Kerry, oncoaching.com, you will find my grounding guide. So it basically is 5 different ways that your child can ground themselves when they feel anxious or when they're feeling big emotions. So one of them is called categories. So when your child is feeling anxious, they're in the amygdala part of the brain, right? The amygdala is like it's kind of like fireworks. So your goal is to try to calm that down. So one of the ways is called categories, and you can play it with your kids. So you and I are going to play it right now. Okay, Lauren, I'm going to think of the category water animals. Name one.
Oh gosh, water animals. An otter, a sea otter?
A sea otter. Blue whale.
Oh my gosh, this is not my strong suit, Kerry. I'm feeling like, okay, water animal. Oh my gosh, a whale. Did you say a whale? You said a whale. A shark?
I said a blue whale. Okay, a shark. Okay, a turtle.
Okay, what are we on? 4? One more? Okay. Man, you're really getting me thinking here. A fish?
Good, there you go. So just that categories, right? You are a perfect example of all of a sudden you had to start using this critical mind and start thinking like, wait, let me find one. So you start using a different part of the brain, and the amygdala starts to calm down as you're working hard trying to find that category. So with your kids, you can do it back and forth until like you can't find anymore. Or if your kid's nervous in school, they can say to themselves, let me think of a category. I'm going to think of colors. And they can start going through the colors in their head.
I like
start
that.
Getting themselves down. Yeah, but the way you did it, though, is perfect, because that's really what ends up happening. You're like struggling to think, is there anything left in the category? And then before you know it, you're not very anxious anymore.
Right. No, that's awesome. I might actually do that with my 4-year-old, because I know she has signs of ADHD and she gets anxious really quickly. So I should probably be like, colors, sweetie, think of colors. And then
colors.
Yeah. Like that. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I would love to. I mean, I think that you and I are definitely a good, what's the word? We balance each other out, right? Because you're working on the parts of dyslexia that I really am not trained in at all. And then I have the emotional, social we complement each other well. That's the word I was looking for.
Yes, I love that. Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just jot a little bit down in the bio of this live. And obviously I'll tag you. So anyone who's watching this later, be sure to visit Kerry's page. She's a great resource. And yeah, shoot us any DMs if you have any questions. And Kerry, obviously, use this on your page. I will end up, this will be edited and put on my YouTube channel. So that will be something that you'll have to use for your resources as well. But this has been awesome.
Great. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it's been such a great discussion. And I'm hoping, I would love to have another part 2 where we could talk maybe kind of some more grounding skills that parents can do. Or maybe even what are the warning signs, right? Like, so with your daughter, if you had known the warning signs of an eating disorder, imagine like how much more quickly you would catch it. Yeah. So I think with parents, if you know what the warning signs are, that maybe their mental health, the mental wellness is crumbling a bit. If you know those warning signs, you can catch it earlier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Kerry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I enjoy the rest of your weekend and we'll be in touch.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.